So I'm joined today by Virginie Ferguson, who is the founder of something called Clan Wellness. And if you're interested, even at the outset of this conversation, go visit clanwellness.com. We will be coming back to talk a lot more about that in a moment. This is a conversation which I think is going to be rather interesting. And the reason I say that is that Virginie is one of these people who has found her way to where she is today through possibly a not particularly traditional route. And I think this, for a lot of us, is really fascinating because I think, to me, it just goes to show that no matter where your starting point, you can often in this life end up somewhere very different. So we're going to hear a little bit about Virginie's story in just a moment, but I just want to give you a little bit of a flavor really as to the kinds of things that I think Virginie does, and then she's going to really probably correct us and correct me. But Virginie is a mental and emotional resilience professional, coach, entrepreneur, you could say, and really is helping organizations and their people as well as individuals to, I guess, really get more in touch with themselves, both emotionally and at times physically as well. And there are a whole bunch of different life coaching skills, training, and experiential things that Virginie gets up to with her clients. And hopefully we'll touch on those and hear a little bit about those in a while. And there are one or two which I am definitely going to drive, hopefully will steer this conversation towards, which is about heart coherence. And this is something that Sonia and I have been talking about for quite some time now. And we've been investigating it and playing with it. And Sonia particularly has uncovered a number of very interesting and quite profound moments really in terms of self-awareness through the concept of heart coherence. So we will almost certainly be heading there at some point in this conversation. But I want to hear from the person herself. So Virginie, welcome to this podcast episode, and tell us a little bit about the story, because it didn't start here, did it? It started in science, of all things.
It did. So thank you, Neil, for having me on your podcast. I'm just delighted to be here. So yeah, my story, I guess, is a funny one. You might also find that the accent can be a little bit funny. I'm French, but I live in Scotland. I've lived there for 17 years, so my accent can be swaying from one end to the French to the Scottish and then anything in between. So hopefully you can understand me okay. But yes, so back a few years ago, I was working in the biopharmaceutical industry, in the biotechnology industry, as a project manager, and my clients were mainly vaccine producers. So when I say biopharmaceutical, it's because it starts up with living cells. So this is why it's called biopharmaceutical. So this is not just pills like, of a chemical components, but these are proteins that are produced by cells or by virus. And so if you're working with viruses, you need a host, you need cells. And my clients were based all over Europe, and because I'm French, I was mainly helping the French-speaking one, but that took me kind of all over Europe. And that was a very, very busy role. I mean, any other project managers out there would feel would recognize that, probably feel the pain I felt back then. And traveling all over Europe, I had 2 children at home. My husband ran his own business, and I remember I came to a point when my daughter was probably about 9 months old, I think, and I was just back full time at work, where everything just became just overwhelming and with stress and trying to be the best version of me at work, and being the best version of me at home. And I just kind of came to a realization that I was becoming this mother that I didn't want to be, that I never wanted to be. And so I came to yoga. So here I was 33 years old back then. And that was my first time stepping onto a yoga mat, and just thought, I will help this. I will try this. And initially I would admit, it was more the physical side of it that attracted me. I was just exhausted, but in that way that I still wanted to keep exercise going. I still wanted to move my body because I knew how that made me feel a lot better when I was exercising regularly. But I just came to the point where I was just too tired. I was struggling to find the time to exercise, to go to a gym and do these sort of things. So I just basically started with an app on my phone early in the morning before anybody got up. I was just making myself getting up a bit earlier just to have that half hour before. And then I just realized how much better I was at emotionally, how much more focused I was when I was getting into work, that I wasn't this all over the place. What am I supposed to be doing next? And just taking that first hour, I was just all over the place. I was really focused. And so with this kind of science background I've got in that first off science, I'm a complete science nerd. I just started to explore and I just wanted to know why was this happening? Why was I feeling so much better? Why just doing yoga, which I met a few years ago. I remember seeing, the yoga classes when I was in the gym and thinking, why would you put yourself in this pose? You just look ridiculous. It's just, it looks silly. Just go and run on the running machine or pick up some weights. That was my mindset at the time. Just quite ashamed to admit now, but here we go. And so I just wanted to know why doing what I was doing, which to me was like a soft exercise. Why was it helping me feel so much better mentally and emotionally? So this is where I started digging into the science of it. And I realized how much we were impacting the nervous system in our bodies through the different nerve plexus, through the breathing, through rebuilding what is interoception. So that feeling, that connection with our bodies and sensations, which we completely forget in our modern lives because we live so much on our minds that we just don't even hear the murmurs, the little messages that the body gives us until it hurts and we need to do something about it. So that's how I started to explore this. And then I came to a point where I thought it was just making me so much good that I felt the pull to share this with others. And so I trained as a yoga teacher first. And then from then on, I was exploring a little bit more about other practices such as gratitude practice. And I remember one time I was searching for some science, some papers, research papers about gratitude and understanding, what was happening, the release of serotonin and oxytocin and dopamine, all these things that kind of make us feel good. Why was that was happening? And how long you had to practice and how you were supposed to practice that gratitude practice to get those neurotransmitters released into your body. And so that led me on to an article from Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's an incredible man. And we've talked about this when we chatted before, Neil, but so he's got several books, but he uses a lot of meditation work and heart coherence practices through emotions and positive emotions to really kind of heal the body through the mind, really, in a nutshell. I think you could say that, and heal your life and become this person that you want to be, that you can be in your life. And so through this article, I was telling about, about the heart math studies I've done, that if you were to practice and feel love and compassion for roughly 15 to 20 minutes, then you were starting to release also IgG, which are antibodies that live in your mucosal tissues. So think about your nose, your lungs. So when we're exposed to viruses such as COVID-19, for example, these are your first line of defense before the virus enters really the body and replicates. They're your first line of defense. So I thought that was just really interesting. And I never heard of the Art Math Institute before. So that led me onto that rabbit hole. And then, before I knew it, I signed up to the training and I was an Art Math coach, because heart coherence is so much bathed in science. It's one of those things where it's the wisdom of the heart. It's that connection to the heart that's human beings have known for millennia, because in every culture and every language, we refer to the heart. Follow your heart, listen to your heart. We've got all these sayings. We know there's wisdom there. We know there's truth somehow. But again, it's one of those things that maybe we just still class as woo-woo or spiritual, where in fact we now have the science to back it all up. So that really that was really right up my street. And so it was just the next step for me. It was really the natural step for me to take. And so this is why that today in what I do in helping people really reduce dramatically their overwhelm, their stress, their anxiety, so that they can just unlock that emotional and mental resilience, so they can show up in their life, in their personal life, with the ones they love the most as their best self, but also supercharge their career and their business with having that clarity of mind and being able to really dive into their implicit intuition, which we can do when we're in this lovely optimum state of being. And that means that physical health, that mental health, that emotional health, and that spiritual health. Because again, from the wisdom of yoga, we can't separate all these things. And this is why in my coaching, I've got a very, very holistic approach where we look at everything. We look at your physical part, experience of years of being, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual, of incorporating all these wisdom, all that wisdom ancient and new, but that is all backed by today's science. That was my long.
It's interesting. Yeah. Isn't it interesting though? And I think that when it comes to the whole yoga thing, and I, a little like you, or in fact actually more like you, found yoga very late in life, surprisingly late in life actually. And yeah, I think for most people, yoga, and it can often stay like this. I think for a lot of people, it's a physical thing. It's, can I do the pose? Can I do the pose as well as that other person in the room? Is that person better than me at doing this? It becomes a competitive thing. It's all about the pose. All the classes are kind of driven towards strike the pose, and you sort of miss a trick. Well, you miss a huge number of tricks because that isn't what yoga actually is. And the trouble is, there are so many now different forms of yoga, and just it seems that everybody's jumping on the commercial bandwagon of, oh, I've just created a different style of yoga. Right, okay, this is really good. But it's still all based about the physicality. It feels, in the way that you describe it, Virginie, that it was very much more about almost that yoga found you, the real kind of pure sort of version or form of yoga found you, rather than the other way around. Is that how it felt at the time? Because it feels that if you were in such a state or such a position where you just felt, I've got to change something, it was almost like yoga appeared kind of on your radar in that moment, rather than you going out searching for it. That's kind of how I heard you describe it. Would you say that was accurate?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, that the actual fact that pushed me into kind of trying it was really because, as I say, I was just in that state where I was exhausted. And I remember, I think at the time we had a holiday booked or something, and I was just like, oh, I want to feel better. And I had a cold, I was coughing, and I was just like, there's no way I can go and do some cardio. I just need something gentle, but still need to move. And I was just like, what can I do? And I thought, oh, right, okay. And I think it was initially, oh, yes, that's what it was. It was what was it called? It was a Nike app. I think they had loads of different fitness classes there. They had your normal HIIT, your cardio, your this, your that. And I think there was something, it wasn't quite yoga, but it was yoga based. And I thought, right, I'll try that. And that, yeah, like I said, just kind of stumbled really across. I never went out to see, I never said to myself, oh, I've heard yoga is good for calming myself down, or I'm going to look out for a class. It wasn't like that at all. It was literally, I just thought, right, okay, there's this on the app. that looks gentle enough. I'm not going to cough my lungs out. I'm going to try this. And that is really how it happened. You're right. That is really, it's just found me rather than me looking for a class or reaching out.
So I guess from that, then it gave you lots of little hints and clues and kind of almost presented itself in terms of it not just being about the movement. I mean, clearly movement and the physical sense of things has been very much part of you for some time. I mean, clearly that is innate in you. But this whole idea of kind of almost challenging you with this more holistic approach. I don't want to say spiritual approach at this point, but holistic approach, this more broad thing about it's partly movement. It's going to be about the breathing. It's about slowing down and stopping. So we could use the word meditation there. Mm-hmm. And of course, then you bring in then this kind of understanding of, the sense of heart, the sense of self, this sense of kind of self-knowing. That is everything you described there. That's holistic self-awareness, isn't it? It's what I would term mindfulness. It's kind of, in essence, all of the various building blocks. So when you kind of began really on this journey, doing this kind of professionally, was there any one particular area of this holistic approach that kind of led you, that was more kind of relevant or applicable, do you think, for the people you were talking to? Was it about, I need to get you to a yoga class to kind of settle you down first and then we'll talk about the rest? Or was it, no, I've got this lovely breathing practice, I'll get you there first and then I'll introduce the rest? What was the hook, do you feel, for you and the people you've worked with?
Yeah, so I know it's funny because initially, like I said, like in my own approach, in my own journey, it was really the physical side that kind of got me in. And for most people, that's what it is as well, because like you say, it's just the way yoga is portrayed. And if you want to show what yoga is on social media, you can't really show a breathing practice. A breathing practice doesn't look right on Instagram, does it? Or meditating or self-inquiring or just observing, taking note of the self, and then all these different, what they call the 8 limbs of yoga, really the practice of the asanas or the posture, which are only one part of those 8. They're really, it's the only part that you can really portray in social media. So I think social media obviously has a lot to answer for, for the stigmas around what yoga is and what it should look like you mentioned, So my own journey was initially towards this practice of posture and with the breath. Then I started doing more breathing exercises. Then I started to add the meditation and the end. So it's just been kind of my own journey going to that. It was really helping me with my own state of mind, my way of being. But then what I found is the people were coming to me. Yes, there's a part of them come to me for the physical side of things first. So maybe they just want a little bit more flexibility. Maybe they are trying to get back into fitness and they just want to start moving and just do something a little bit more gentle. But a lot of them were coming for the peace, for the peace of mind, for finding a way to deal better with their anxiety and with their stress, to cut themselves off the craziness of the world, often women being mums and busy in their work, and just having that 1 hour to themselves and just to reconnect and just to breathe and just to not think of anything else, but just them for that 1 hour. So I think naturally the people who are coming to me were people that were like me or like I was before when I started on this journey. And so, through my own journey, my own interest, I have just attracted people who were seeking that same thing. And so I think it's been a natural evolution of my business, just that followed my natural evolution, me as a human being, as I was on my journey. And And like I say, we can't separate body, mind, and in the West we really have this for many years, kind of really bucketed this. You've got body, you've got mind. We talk about mental health, and we talk about physical health, and then maybe we'll talk about the soul and spirituality, which just sounds a little bit more woo-woo, but all it is, in fact, is really kind of your own values, your deep core values, your beliefs, what makes up your ethics and what's important to you, yourself, like you were talking about earlier. And I've lost my train of thought there. But yeah, it's that holistic approach, really, because as I said, we've bucketed this in the West, but when you think about it, if you wanted to look at it through the lens of yoga, where they call it, you've got the 5 koshas, the 5 sheaths, or the 5 layers of your human experience, which are really the physical body, they got the energetic body, emotional body, the mental body, and then the last one, which is the blessed body, kind of the spiritual side, where you just peeled all the layers of the onion, what you truly are, your core, basically. But if we wanted to explain it and through a Western way of thinking, or through science, just again, we can't separate those things, because a thought, for example, a thought would pertain to the mental domain. But what is a thought? A thought is a connection between neurons. It's an exchange of energy, of chemicals in your brain. So again, you've got that energetic component there. And those neurotransmitters that are creating the thoughts that your brain is interpreting as a thought, it's then going to trigger a release of all sorts of hormones in the body. So that's bringing it back again to the body, the energetic body as well, again, because it's that exchange, that constant exchange of energy that's transformed into something else. But emotions don't pertain to the mind. They're felt in the body. They are physical sensations. We also got to think about, as we evolved as human beings when we were first born, we don't have a developed brain to analyze things, to think, to verbalize. So everything we experience in the way we express ourselves and we're able to communicate is through emotions and through our bodies. So we can't even take these away. They're not separate, because a thought can be triggering an emotion that you're going to feel in your body, but the opposite is true as well. And again, that's one of the things through heart coherence is feelings through the body are picked up by your nervous system. You might feel the emotion even before you get the thought. The emotion might trigger the thoughts. So it's all these things are just intertwined, and we can't separate them. They are just part of your human experience. So we can't just address illness in the body, illness in the mind, or illness in emotions. They are all one. We have to work through it all. We have to create that balance between all these aspects of our experience to create that capacity, that resilience. Because again, if you think about, and that's where resilience comes from, we have got a certain amount of energy. You can picture an inner battery, if you wish, inside. And that battery is going to feed your body, is going to feed your mind, is going to feed your emotions. So if you are depleted, if you are physically depleting yourself, if you're not sleeping well, or you're really challenging yourself, I don't know, you run marathon or anything like that, and you're challenged all of a sudden mentally or emotionally, you're really going to struggle with dealing with that challenge, because your inner battery is depleted. So building that resilience is about kind of building this capacity, this inner capacity, protect it as much as we can. So it is available whether you're challenged physically, mentally, emotionally, or even spiritually. If something comes into conflict with your deep values, your core values, and your beliefs, that will shock, that will stress you, that will challenge you. So it's about really building that capacity so you're able to face those challenges, and building that flexibility and flexibility in the way you're thinking, you know, that flexibility in your mental domain might be, you know, being able to think differently, to think outside the box, to take other people's ideas and incorporate them rather than being really set in your ways. Emotionally, it's all about self-regulation, is being able to make that emotional choice, to not staying stuck in a negative way of feeling, you know, negative emotions, not being stuck in anger or frustration or depression all the time, but being able to make that choice to move yourself towards a better way of feeling. And again, like the same ideas to, you know, when we think about spirituality, being able to accept other people's values and belief and being flexible with that. And in the physical domain is, you know, about endurance, about strength and flexibility in the body as well, if that makes sense.
It does. It makes total sense, and it really resonates with, you know, number of conversations that I've had actually on this podcast as well over the last sort of 12 to 18 months or so. And it feels like this is all kind of coming together beautifully. There's a real kind of synergy between, you know, all of these kind of threads that, you know, you've described coming together in this holistic approach. And I want to get to the point of the discussing in a much deeper sort of level the whole heart coherence thing, because I think if people don't know about heart coherence, it is so significant. Just before I do that, though, I just wanted to reflect on something that I was taught a few years back. Sonia and I went to, I think it was about a 3-day workshop. I'm sure it was over 3 days with the kinesiologist Claire Kedwood, who is a holistic teacher. And one of the tools that she taught us was the dinner party technique, which was a really interesting one. And just really interested to hear your kind of view on this. And it was about trying to really tap into, for people particularly who find it difficult to separate this whole kind of thoughts, feelings, physicality, emotion piece. Because if you say that, is for lots of people, it's like, oh, it's just everything I'm thinking. So they constantly go back to their head and kind of their thoughts, and so the mind. So the dinner party technique was very much about saying, okay, in your mind's eye, if you could picture a dinner table to which you invite your heart sat in one seat, your mind sat in another seat, your body sat in another seat, and your soul sat in another seat, and just allow them their own space and allow them to almost set up and see and experience a dynamic between themselves. And for me, I mean, when I say this to some people, they kind of look at me as though I'm from another planet, because I think it takes a little bit of time to kind of work with this tool, this technique. But when I heard this, I thought, oh my Lord, I really understand this kind of real distance between the way my mind thinks, the way my body supports what my mind is thinking, but how distant my heart is. So my heart kind of sat over here in isolation, whereas my body and my mind, they're in cahoots. They're kind of figuring out, yeah, you can be strong. Yeah, if you do that run or that cycle. Yes, if you do this, I'm going to support you. I'm going to be resilient in my body, but my mind's going to sort of be firm and be tough with my body, and they're going to kind of work together, and they're not going to listen to my heart. And so she was challenging me by saying, yeah, but what does your heart feel towards that? What's your heart feeling? Like you say, really listen to your heart. But what was happening was my body and my mind, they were kind of just turning away from my heart and really not paying it attention. And I think there's a consequence to everything, but I think physically and emotionally, there was a consequence building up that my heart was feeling really quite left out. So I was chasing, and it was chasing, because body and mind tend to be quite relentless if you put them together. So I was kind of chasing and pursuing things without really necessarily listening to what my heart needs. And what does my heart need? It needs to be in the sea. It needs to be in nature. It needs to have time. It needs to sit quietly. It needs to watch the stars and the sunsets. But my body and mind were thinking, no, I can go for a bike ride, or no, I can do that extra hour of work. And so there wasn't a coherence. There was almost a distance in between the two. But by seeing them kind of sat in different seats around this dinner table, and then if you put in then a question and see how each element kind of reacts to those things. And instantly my body and my mind were coming together and we're having a little chat in the corner. But my heart was sat over there all lonely. And my soul was just sat there almost kind of nodding like, he'll get it in a minute, almost like the patronizing, here we go again kind of way. But that was how it felt. That was how it sounded. And that's how it looked. And so it was just totally right. So now what you're describing, if anybody's still with me on this particular anecdote, but what you're describing here is this real coming together and almost really working in harmony. So your heart is genuinely listening to what your body needs. Your mind is actually working to support your values, your soul purpose, all of those amazing things. Your soul is kind of overseeing it all, just making sure everything's okay and kind of maybe just fine-tuning things if you're getting slightly off course. But it kind of puts your mind in check, because I think for a lot of people in these crazy times, the chaos, the lack of clarity, the lack of direction, the kind of almost the unknowns of where this whole world is going almost can just dominate everything else, can't it? So if some of that is true, then surely then listening to your heart, the gratitude that you talked about earlier, and really coming to terms with the power of your heart, the memory of your heart intelligence, which a lot of people don't realize there's a memory and an intelligence and decision making that actually happens within your heart. Nowhere near your brain. That's where your mind exists. But actually in your heart, there's amazing powers of stuff happening if you really choose to listen. So I'm really early on this journey. I know it's there and I know there's something going on. So I guess this seamlessly takes us into this whole topic of heart coherence.
Yes.
Where do you begin with somebody who is kind of maybe either a skeptic, they're wanting to know the science, they're kind of a little bit heart coherence? Well, that doesn't sound real. You've got to convince my mind and my body before we're even going to have this conversation. Where do you begin with something like heart coherence? Because as you've said already twice, it's a little bit woo-woo to lots of people.
Yeah. And do you know, I like what you said. I just love that concept of the dinner table, by the way. Really, really good. I think I might use that as well some days with my clients. But yeah, I think what you were describing there, when you're saying, you know, your mind and body were working really well together, but you were just kind of disregarding what the heart was saying, is really kind of almost symptoms of the overanalyzing and the overthinking. You haven't allowed your implicit intuition a voice. You know, and when I talk about implicit intuition, it's those implicit memories and experience and beliefs that are kind of all coming together. So you've got that sense of knowing what to do. We can call it a gut feeling, or we can call it, you know, following your heart. But you can access that implicit intuition once you have put the free part of your brain in that lovely, cohesive and harmonious way. So, you know, like the brain, you can divide it in like 3 different parts. So you've got like the primitive brain, which is really about, you know, very, very basic function, like keeping your temperature, your blood pressure at a certain level, that sort of stuff. Then you've got like what we call the emotional brain, that's got the amygdala, which is your threat center, includes your hippocampus, which is the place where you make memories and retain new information. And then you've got your analytical brain, if you wish, or the higher thinking function, kind of the prefrontal lobes, which are all where the kind of the analytical thinking, the forward planning, and all these things happen. When these don't work in harmony, so for example, when we are challenged, when we are stressed, when we are anxious, when we are overwhelmed, and we get triggered into what's called the stress response, it's your emotional brain that takes over. You can't have that top to bottom control anymore. So this is why we'll find ourselves in a situation where, like, after, why the hell did I say this? Or why did I do that? It doesn't make sense. You know, you're controlled by your emotions. You've not got time. You're in survival mode, basically. You don't have time to analyze or think or anything like that. You get brain fog. So the 3 parts of the brain are not working together very well. But what's really important to understand, and you've touched on that, is the heart is not just this muscle that pumps blood around the body. That's the image that most people have, and that's the way we think of the heart. And it's just very important, right? Pumps blood around the body. That's the heart, it's a muscle, and that's it. But it's not only that. So there's on your heart with what's called sometimes the heart brain. So you've got a set of over 60,000 neurons that sit on your heart. Your heart sets its own heartbeat. So it's not the brain telling the heart how to beat. Your heart sets its own beat. It's also a hormonal gland, so it releases and produces oxytocin as much as the brain. And oxytocin is the love hormone, is the bonding hormone. This is why we feel fuzzy, or we feel that sense in our heart when we express love with somebody. It's the hormone that mothers produce when they go into labor and when they breastfeed. It helps them bond with the newborn child. It's the bonding hormone. It's what glue us together as human beings. We release oxytocin when with our friends, with people we love, when we exchange and have experiences with them. So that's two things the heart has. But the heart has got a very, very close relationship with what's called the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is a very, very important nerve in the body. And most of its nerve endings end up in the gut. So you may have heard of the gut brain as well, which is what it's referred to as how your gut and your microbiome feeds back through the vagus nerve back to the heart, through the heart first, and then to the brain. And the heart-brain communication is 5 times stronger, at least 5 times stronger than the brain-heart communication. So your heart communicates way, way more to your brain than the brain communicates to your heart. So that's quite important, because most people don't realize that. We think that the mind, the brain is this all-deciding emperor has got control over everything else. In fact, no, it just receives information from the body and interprets and just does something with it. And we can have that top to bottom control when we are in that coherent and harmonious way of being, when all of the parts of your body, your brain work together, and we can have access to that implicit intuition. We can have access to these memories that we're not quite sure are there. It's more on the subconscious, those beliefs and those experiences. So you can make the right decision. You've got that clarity of mind. You can listen to your heart, where really listening to your heart is listening to our intuition, really, which we've blocked out because we've not let our heart go into that coherent way. And the coherent way is, when we talk about heart coherence, it's really about creating a coherent beating pattern. So, like I said, the heart sets its own beat. And the whole premise around heart coherence and all the research that HeartMath have been doing has been around how emotions influence your heartbeats pattern, and how that feeds back to the brain and create a certain state of mind. So when we feel negative emotions, so we feel frustration, fear, anger, all these types of emotions, we feel them in the body, and they trigger a very erratic pattern in the way your heart is beating. It's fast, it's slow, it's if you were to look at a graph, it just looks like mountains, like very jaggy mountains. And what that gives is, through the electrical current, the electromagnetic activity of your heart as well, it just feeds back to the brain, something's wrong. So this is how you get triggered into almost, again, that stress response, and you don't have access to your higher cognitive functions, the different parts of your brains are not functioning in an harmonious way. However, when we feel love, compassion, care, gratitude, like I mentioned earlier, it's a big one, then your heart can go into a very, very smooth, coherent pattern. And we can trigger our heart to do this through breathing pattern. But what the HeartMath Institute have noticed was that, yes, we can do that with the breath. But once we start to plug in and really kind of leverage positive emotions, it goes into even higher into coherence. So, and what is the message in that's fed back to your brain is that everything is well, and your heart has that power to entrain your entire body and brain and mind into this optimum state of being. Because you got to think also, you know, we've talked about the heart through being that having that communication with the brain, that activity through the neurons. We've talked about the hormone, the law of hormone, but there's also this electromagnetic activity. Your field around yourself can be detected. The activity of your heart can be detected up to a foot outside of you. So this is how we can pick up on other people, what we can vibes, you know, like we're like, oh, don't like their vibes. Or, you know, if someone comes into a meeting room and you're like, oh, they're not having a good day, you pick that up straight away because we've got that electromagnetic activity from the heart, that in the beating pattern. But also think about it as that pump again, pumping the blood through the body. There's that vibration that vibrates through your entire body. There's that rush of blood through the cells, and your cells respond to their external environment. They have got receptors. They respond to pressure, to movement. Every cell in your body does that, and they switch on genes on and off. And based on that mechanical pressure that they feel. So you can see how a coherent heartbeat pattern can influence your entire being.
Isn't it interesting that I think for the vast majority of us, therefore, and the science, as you say, Virginie, that the science is backing this up. This is not just people making this up and thinking, oh, that would be a good thing to say because it's different. This is all based on science. It means really most of us have been getting it wrong for years and years and years. You know, we've had, you know, mood boards where we've got this, oh, I wish to have this lovely house or this lovely car. I'm going to think positively and it's going to happen. And it's all kind of driven by positive mental thought. And we've been trained at school to, you know, sit still and think positively and do these things and do this. We started from the wrong place by the sounds of things. And actually, if we'd consistently felt it rather than just be thinking about it, we could have gone so much quicker in this process because we would have filtered out all of those, we call it monkey mind, with the chatter thoughts, all the storytelling. It's based on history. It's based on, you know, projecting forward into the future of things we don't have any clue about at all. If we'd just been quiet and just listened to the heart, we wouldn't have wasted all that energy and time. This seems like a really simple thing. If you can figure this out, it's the simplest thing on the planet, isn't it?
It is so simple, yeah. And like you say, all these things, you know, like having those vision boards and stuff, they all work if you are in that right state in your nervous system and in your heart. And like you say, you know, again, got to think the emotional brain takes over most of the time. So you have to be in that right emotional state to be able to access those cognitive functions and drive the thoughts, the actions, the behaviors that are going to get you to what you want to achieve. But if you're not in the right place in your nervous system emotionally, it's going to be so much hard work. And like you say, you have to feel it. And that's the thing about gratitude, you know, gratitude practice has just been a bit of a buzz for the last few years. Oh, you must have a gratitude practice. And some people would say, you know, like first thing in the morning, speak to yourself in the mirror and say 3 things you're grateful for aloud, or write them down in your journal at night. Yeah, great. But if you don't take that next step, which is really feeling it, engaging that gratitude feeling in your heart and your body, you're doing nothing, really.
And it is that kind of transference, isn't it? I think that, you know, entrainment, I think, was the word that you used. And it was, yeah, it is. It's almost kind of entraining yourself and your brain from your heart, but it's also then entraining to others, because I think this is quite addictive stuff, isn't it? If you can get this right, what is not to like being around somebody who is in a heart coherent state, I mean, it just is great, isn't it? I mean, you know this, you will have experienced this. And so if it's almost about surrounding yourself with like-minded others. We're all on a journey. We're not saying necessarily perfection is what we're seeking here, but it's just pausing, isn't it? It's just taking a moment out, which seems to me, I think for most people, to be the hardest thing to do. And they might find actually that, you know, heart coherence and any of these practices are actually quite straightforward to do in simple terms if they could take a break. So why is it, do you think, that people just don't give themselves the permission to take the time, to take a break? Because this doesn't have to take hours and hours every day, does it?
No. And just before I answer that question, I'm just going to go back into what you were saying there, because it is really interesting and very important about entraining others. You know, like I mentioned, you know, that person comes into the meeting room and you can pick up on their vibe and you're like, oh, something's wrong. Equally, like you said, if you are in a coherent state, that spreads to others around you as well. And in fact, there are a few studies that the Art Math Institute have done. They've done things with observing people in their pets. So there was a little boy and his dog, there was a lady and a horse, all measuring the heart rate variability, so measuring how the heart was beating, and how they could see that, you know, when they were separated and there was this kind of separation anxiety sort of thing, how the heart rate was going all over the place. But once they were reunited, their heart was going in synchronization, beating into this lovely coherent pattern. And they've also done a study where they put 4 people in the room. 3 of them were practicing heart coherence. The 4th person had no clue what was going on. They were just sitting there around the table doing nothing. And again, what we've been able to see is how this 4th person's heart was getting entrained into this coherent pattern through the other people around this 4th person. And I've seen this as well in my everyday life as a mother, to calm my children, especially my youngest. It works. It's just, you know, in those, you know, that how children can just get sometime into this heightened state that they're so angry or they're in that tantrum, they can't come down. There's nothing you can say to them or do, or they don't want to be touched, they don't want to, there's nothing you can do or say that's going to calm them down. But a lot of the time, what I've just been doing is sitting near her, you know, again, like I said, you know, about a foot. Maybe it goes further. Maybe human beings can detect it better. We can detect with the machines that we have today, the science today, up to a foot around us. But we can probably, as human beings, we can probably detect and feel it at further distance. But what I've always been doing since I've been practicing heart coherence is, if she gets into a state like this, is just sit quite close by and do my own heart coherence practice. First of all, for my own sake as well, because it keeps me calm. I know I'm not going to just go and get triggered again in that fight or flight and respond to what she's doing. I'm going to keep myself calm. And then it just entrains her, because she does on her own calm herself. Just she comes back down, she comes back down, she comes back down. And then eventually she'll come and sit close to me and maybe she'll give me a cuddle. And then, but just me being there and doing that practice, I can see how this has impacted her, and impacts my clients. Do it with our children as well. I've got a client who's got 2 children on kind of autism and different spectrum, who obviously kind of can be quite challenge themselves, and it's challenging for her as well. And she's seen how much that's been able to impact their behavior and how much quicker they calm down when she does this. And then what was your question again? Sorry, Neil, because I went on to that.
We've kind of moved way beyond. I don't even remember. I'm listening to you. I'm not even thinking of my previous question. But it's just the way you describe it. So I have no idea what I asked for. But Hey, this is a lovely flow of conversation. Just the way you describe that, though, I can see there'll be some huge benefits for, I mean, not only in the workplace where you can imagine teams trying to come together to solve challenges, and I guess particularly if there's kind of like a need for innovation, for example, it would feel that heart coherence would be an amazing way of, opening up new channels of mindset and innovation. But I was also thinking, actually, again, the way you were describing it would be in a sports team. You think where you
Yes.
have to perform together. If you were all heart coherent, and you imagine a new team member or a substitute replacement coming into the team, you could imagine just in training that new team member, it'd just be so super powerful, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's used a lot in golf, in the world of golf, and then, like you say, in kind of competitive sports within teams, and yeah, it opens up. It's building that flexibility, because if you imagine being in that state where you're more heart led, like you've got more compassion, you've got more love, you've got your brain working into this optimum state of being, you'll have more creativity, you'll have more open conversations, communications, where people are not triggered by each other and responding in a sort of fight or flight or even freeze, where they're like, I'm not saying anything anymore, I'm done. It's just, so yeah, absolutely. And I just remembered your question. It was about how people don't take the time to do it and do these simple
That was it.
practices.
Yes.
And it's all about, because we only practice them sporadically. If, I always say to people, these practices are so simple, but they need to be sort of ingrained in your autopilot or into your subconscious. You need to create that habit, like it's like going to the gym. If you're going to the gym and one day you do loads of bicep curls, you can't expect your bicep to respond the next time you're going to pick up a weight and just be ready for action. You've got to slowly build it. You've got to let the bicep respond, adapt, and reinforce itself. And then after you've done that a few times, then it's just going to become natural to pick up that big weight. It's going to be easy. Same thing happens in the brain and nervous system. It's that neuroplasticity. You need to create that new neural pathway, that new connection, and reinforce it. So the trick is not just to think about, in the moment I need to do this, but it's about finding little times, random times of your day where you can do it. You can, if we borrow the principles of James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, and he's got this principle of habit stacking, is stack a habit, stack that practice when you're already doing something in your day, like you're in your shower, practice it when you're in your shower for 5 minutes in the morning. When you're at the red light, if it's only went for 1 minute, it doesn't matter. Practice at the red light. Put like post-it notes in your wheel to remind yourself to do it. So yeah, I think it comes from, because it reminds me a lot of when people said to me, I've got a lot of people who come to me who have already been in therapy, who've done maybe cognitive behavioral therapy, and they said to me, I've been taught techniques, but when I'm in the heat of the moment, I can't remember them, I can't access them. And again, it goes back to being able to be in the right state, in the right nervous system state, in the right emotional state, so you can remember these things. If you're not, you can't access that. So you can't tell yourself to do something because you don't have access to the two prefrontal lobes there. But it's also because when we're doing through this therapy, it was just like, right, do this when you feel that way, when you feel triggered, do that. But you need to kind of sort of build that habit. You need to create that neural pathway first, because your brain just wants to conserve energy. It's going to do it. It's always going to choose the path of least resistance. It doesn't want to think, what should I do next now? It's just always going to go back to that default pattern. So you need to undo those patterns and create new ones. So it's about gently creating those new neural pathways. And like you say, it doesn't take long, and it doesn't have to be something you add to your to-do list. There's already many things in your life that you're doing out of habits that are already there. What can you use that to add this little practice? And like I say, the shower, the driving your car, being at the red lights, all these little moments could be an opportunity.
Wow, this is such wisdom, and it's just lovely to have a conversation like this that we know at the core is based on the science. And I know you're such a huge fan of science-based evidence, and it's not just, as you describe it, the woo-woo of this stuff, because I think a lot of people, but a significant number of people do still believe that, whereas HeartMath Institute, and we'll put a link to the HeartMath Institute at the bottom of this episode, because I think it's really important that anybody who is interested can go and explore that. But I want to kind of send people in your direction, Virginie, because I think a lot of people will have heard there's a lot of wisdom here. There's lots of new thinking possibly for them, but I think for all of us kind of listening to you talk, it is about this holistic nature of all of this, because it's almost like you're talking about and evangelizing something where all of the things that we hear about and read about, and people are teaching us about, and there's a podcast on this and a podcast on that, it feels the way that you're doing this holistically is where it all comes together. It feels that there's this lovely purity at the center of everything that you're doing, which means you don't have to go off and do that and that and that and that and that. Virginie will teach you how to do just a few things holistically that will actually solve all of these issues all in one place in a simple daily habit. And that feels to me like a thing that everybody's been crying out for. So I want to point people in your direction. So clanwellness.com, is that the best place to get hold of you?
Yeah, that's the website. I'm active also on Facebook, on Instagram. So if you look for Clan Wellness, I'll be there. And on LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. So if people want to send me a message and start a conversation, I'm there. So I'm under Virginie Ferguson on LinkedIn. So if you look for me, you should see me there. My little face and my orange background.
Great. But I do recommend to everybody to go and have a look at clanwellness.com. Some really just interesting kind of thought leading kind of titles, and some of the things in terms of self-empowerment and kind of tapping into your subconscious, and just really a trail of events of things that you can do to just bring it all together. And I think this is where, for me, that whole resonance of heart coherence really comes into play, is it is about pulling all this stuff together. So go check out Virginie, and you will learn a lot. So Virginie, thank you so much for your time. I know your calendar and schedule is pretty hectic right now, so I'm going to let you get on. But really, really grateful for coming on this particular episode. It's given me a lot of clarity in terms of the way to kind of think and talk about this stuff going forward. So really, really grateful for your time and energies. And yes, everybody go check clanwellness.com, because I think we'll be very glad that you did. Thanks again, Virginie.
Thank you very much, Neil, for having me. Pleasure.